The officer stares at her, his expression a mix of disbelief and confusion. For a moment, it seems like he might back down, maybe even apologize for the escalating tension. But before he can respond, the sound of another police car pulling up cuts through the silence. The crowd shifts uneasily, their attention now divided. Two more officers step out of the vehicle, their faces grim, clearly ready to back up their colleague. The officer who initially stopped her exchanges a glance with his partners, and his grip on his radio tightens. The situation is quickly spiraling. The woman doesn't flinch, but her mind races. She's not worried about herself, not entirely. What's worse than her being underestimated is that these officers may not understand the full weight of the moment. They might not realize the message they're about to send with their next move. As the new officers approach, the woman's phone buzzes quietly in her pocket. She knows who it is without looking. Her colleagues at the courthouse. They've heard what's happening, and they're ready to help, but there's a catch. They've already warned her about encounters like this. The stakes are now higher than she imagined. The officer, now visibly frustrated, speaks louder, ordering her to step out once again. His voice cracks slightly, revealing his uncertainty. The second officers glance at each other, sensing the unease. Tension fills the air, thicker now than before, with the officers unsure whether to escalate or de-escalate the situation. What started as a traffic stop has turned into a potential showdown, and the woman knows exactly how high the stakes have become, not just for her, but for the entire community watching. The tension reaches a boiling point as the two additional officers close in, their steps heavy and deliberate. The crowd is holding its breath, waiting for something, anything, to break the silence. The woman stands her ground, unshaken, her eyes unwavering as she repeats her question, her voice now a quiet but undeniable command. "Do you know who I am?" For a moment, it feels like time stops. The first officer looks back at his partners, uncertainty creeping across his face. His hand hovers over his belt, torn between his next move and the knowledge that this situation is quickly spiraling out of his control. Then, just as the pressure becomes unbearable, one of the bystanders, someone who had been quietly filming the encounter, steps forward and loudly calls out her name. "Wait, is that Judge Jenkins?" A collective gasp rises from the crowd. The officer freezes, his face draining of color as realization dawns on him. The woman, Judge Jenkins, was no ordinary driver. She was a powerful figure in the legal system, someone whose presence commanded respect. The officer's pride falters, and in that split second, the narrative shifts. He stammers, unsure of what to say, his earlier bravado fading. But then, in a shocking turn, Judge Jenkins takes a deep breath and surprises everyone. She doesn't escalate the situation any further. Instead, she steps back and calmly lowers her hands, offering the officer a chance to de-escalate himself. "You're doing your job," she says softly, her tone unexpectedly kind. "But I suggest you think about the choices you made today." As the onlookers watch in stunned silence, the officers, now fully aware of their misstep, exchange awkward glances. The second officers, who had been prepared for a more forceful confrontation, hesitate. The first officer lowers his hand from his radio, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and reluctant respect. He nods just barely, realizing the weight of his mistake. The crowd, sensing the tension break, murmurs quietly as the officers slowly step back. Judge Jenkins's calm demeanor holds them in place, as if reminding them of their responsibilities. It's a quiet victory, a moment of justice and humility in an unexpected form. But just before she turns to leave, the final twist hits. Judge Jenkins pauses, then turns to the first officer with one last piercing look. "I'll see you in court," she says, her voice calm but laced with authority. The officer stiffens, the reality of his actions finally settling in. The crowd goes silent once more, leaving everyone wondering what will come next. A routine traffic stop takes a shocking turn when a white officer pulls over a black woman for what seems like a minor infraction. What he doesn't know: the woman in the driver's seat is no ordinary citizen. She's a respected judge. The encounter begins like any other, with questions and formalities, but tension starts to build as the officer's tone shifts and assumptions come into play. The woman remains calm, her demeanor steady, but there's a quiet power in her words. She knows the law better than anyone else on that road. What happens next leaves both the officer and the onlookers stunned, raising questions about bias, authority, and respect. How will the officer react when he learns her true identity? Will this encounter become a lesson in humility, or something more? Stick around, because this story has a twist you won't see coming. As the officer demands her license and registration, the woman's calm yet firm response hints that something more is at play. Her voice remains composed, but there's a quiet tension in her eyes that suggests she's been in situations like this before. The officer, on the other hand, is clearly flustered. His body language tightens as he asks her to step out of the vehicle. He's already forming judgments, perhaps influenced by unconscious bias, as the confrontation escalates. Meanwhile, onlookers begin to gather, some recording the interaction, sensing the unease in the air. The woman's silence speaks volumes. She knows how this will unfold, and she knows her rights. But what no one knows, not even the officer, is that her position in the legal system grants her authority beyond what meets the eye. The officer's next move could change everything. Will he back down or push the situation further? The tension continues to rise. The officer steps closer, his hand hovering over his belt, as if considering whether to reach for his radio or escalate the situation. His voice becomes more forceful, his commands sharper. "Step out of the vehicle now," he insists, his body language aggressive. The crowd begins to murmur, sensing the shift in power dynamics, some whispering, others quietly filming the scene. The woman remains calm, her eyes locking with his, but she's not moving. She's aware of every word he says, every action he takes. There's a slight pause, as if she's weighing the right moment to reveal her identity. Her heart beats steadily. She's been in courtroom battles, but this feels different. The stakes are personal now, not just professional. She knows this isn't just about her anymore. It's about the treatment of people like her, those who face bias daily, those who are underestimated, misunderstood, or seen as less than. In that instant, she wonders if this encounter is meant to teach a lesson. But the officer doesn't know any of that. As the standoff stretches on, the tension between them becomes palpable. He senses she's no ordinary person, but he's too far into the moment to stop. Something about her refusal to comply digs into his pride, and the crowd watches anxiously, waiting for the next move. What will happen when he realizes who she really is? The clock is ticking, and every second feels like it might break the silence. The officer's hand inches closer to his radio, but something in the woman's steady gaze makes him hesitate. Her silence cuts deeper than words, and for a moment, he seems unsure of what to do next. The crowd is growing, the tension in the air thick with anticipation. Phones are raised, capturing every moment, and whispers of "what's happening" ripple through the onlookers. The woman knows this is her moment, but she isn't in a rush. She stands firm, her posture resolute, as if every second is working in her favor. The officer steps back, visibly frustrated. He keeps talking, faster now, trying to control the situation. But there's a crack in his confidence. His commands grow more frantic, his authority challenged by the woman's composed defiance. He's questioning himself, unsure if he's crossed a line, but too proud to back down. Then, just when it seems the situation might explode, the woman speaks. Her voice is low, yet powerful, cutting through the tension. "Do you know who I am?" she asks, her tone not of anger, but of quiet authority. The question hangs in the air, heavy with meaning. The officer blinks, pausing as the words sink in. He doesn't answer right away, his confusion visible. The crowd falls silent, waiting for the officer's response, but the weight of the question lingers. Her calm demeanor is unnerving to him now, the power shift unmistakable. What happens next will either be the officer's redemption or his downfall, but there's no turning back from this moment. Every eye is on him, and with every passing second, the pressure mounts. As Judge Jenkins walks away, the air feels lighter, but the moment lingers in the minds of everyone who witnessed it. The officers stand in place, their faces a mix of guilt and realization. The crowd slowly disperses, some whispering about what they had just witnessed. The officer who had stopped her seems lost in thought, as though trying to process everything that just unfolded. He knows this won't be the end. Weeks later, news outlets pick up the story, and the footage of the encounter circulates online, sparking discussions on bias, authority, and respect in law enforcement. Judge Jenkins's calm response to the situation becomes a symbol of strength and grace under pressure, reminding everyone of the importance of standing up for what's right, no matter the odds. For the officer, the encounter becomes a turning point, one that changes his perspective forever. And for the community, it serves as a powerful reminder that justice can come from unexpected places.